Somewhere in Season 3, a grown man wearing a lab coat stands in a kitchen, looks directly at a woman asking him a simple question about his life, and lies. He has been lying since the first episode. He lies about being smart. He lies about not caring. He lies about where he has been. He lies about who his grandson really is. He lies about what is inside his flask. And the scariest thing about Rick Sanchez is that he is not just lying to his family. He is lying to you. For the next 2 hours, every single thing you thought you knew about Rick and Morty is going to get dragged into the light and turned inside out. 10 of the darkest theories fans have ever built around this show. 10 reasons the funny grandfather in the garage might be the most disturbing cartoon character ever written. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let us get started. The original Rick killed himself, and our Rick is a replacement. Let me start with the one that nobody wants to be true. The one that, once you see the evidence, you can't unsee. The one that changes every single scene between Rick and his family from that point forward. The Rick we watch every week. The Rick we laugh with. The Rick who burps and drinks and yells at Jerry, and occasionally, maybe once a season, shows a flash of something that looks like love for his grandkids. That Rick. He might not be the real one. He might be a stranger wearing a dead man's face. And the original Rick, the Rick who actually belonged to this family, might have killed himself a long time ago. The theory comes from a Reddit user named DJ Jazzy Dwarf, and it hinges on a single moment from Season 2, Episode 8, Rick's D Minutes. You remember the episode. It's the one where Rick hooks the TV up to cable from across the multiverse, and the family ends up watching versions of themselves on different channels. It's mostly remembered as a funny episode, but there is one scene that most people laugh at and then move on from, and that scene is the core of this whole theory. In the middle of the episode, Summer is upset. She's just learned that she was an accident, that Beth and Jerry only got married because of her. She runs out of the house. She's going to leave, and Morty stops her. Morty pulls her into his room to talk her down, and this is where the quiet horror begins. Morty tells her a story. He tells her that the version of him sitting on the bed is not her original brother. He tells her about Rick Potion 9. He tells her that the original Morty and the original Rick died in a garage explosion in a different reality, and that he and his grandfather buried their own corpses in the backyard and moved into this family's life like nothing happened. And then he points out the window at a patch of dirt in the yard, and he says, "Your real brother is out there." The thing about that scene isn't just the confession. It's how calm Morty is. He's not crying. He's not afraid. He's just tired. He tells Summer that nothing matters, that nobody belongs anywhere, and the sooner she accepts that, the happier she'll be. This is a 14-year-old boy saying that. And what fans noticed is that Morty had to have learned that coldness from somebody. He had to have copied that reaction from someone who already had it. That someone, obviously, is Rick. Here is what the theory actually claims. The Rick who appears at the start of the show, the one who shows up in Beth's garage after being gone for 20 years, is not the Rick who was married to Diane. The original Rick of this family, the one who was Beth's actual father when she was a little girl, killed himself when Beth was still young. That's why there was a 20-year gap. That's why Beth has abandonment issues. She thinks her dad left her, but he didn't leave her. He died. And some other Rick, from some other reality, slid into the empty slot in her life the same way our Rick and Morty slid into the Smith family in Rick Potion 9. Why do people think this? Why is this more than just a wild guess? Because of a scene in Season 1, the Season 1 finale? Close Rick counters of the Rick kind. Rick is being chased by other Ricks, and at one point, our Rick and our Morty run through a warehouse of failed Ricks, dead Ricks, broken Ricks, and Rick sees his own dead body at one point in the series, more than once, and his reaction is never what a normal person's reaction would be. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't gasp. He just knows. He knows the drill. He knows exactly what to do with a dead version of himself, because he has done it before. The theory argues that he has done it before because the first time he did it, the body he was burying was the original Rick of this family. The Rick who gave up. The Rick who ended it. And there is more. There is the drinking. Rick drinks constantly. Rick is, by any normal definition, a man who is slowly killing himself on purpose. The show has said this outright. Birdperson told us in the second season what Rick's catchphrase really means. Wubba lubba dub dub. The words Rick says when he is pretending to be cheerful. Those words, in Birdperson's language, mean, "I am in great pain. Please help me." Think about how often he says that phrase in the first 2 seasons. Think about how casually. A man who is constantly, cheerfully, publicly saying, "Please help me," is not a happy man. A man like that, in a universe with infinite versions of himself, might reach a breaking point. And if he did, who would even know? Who would be able to tell the difference between this Rick and another Rick? Now here is the part of the theory that makes it stick. Because it's one thing to say a Rick killed himself. It's a whole different thing to say that our Rick, the one we love, is the one who replaced him. But the show has set up this exact behavior as something Rick does. We watched him do it. In Rick Potion 9, Rick ruins a world. The planet becomes monsters. Rick can't fix it. So he grabs Morty, finds a reality where a different Rick and a different Morty just died in a freak accident, and they move in. They bury their own bodies. They sit down at the dinner table, and the family never finds out. If he'll do it to escape a mess he made with a love potion, he'll do it to escape grief. He'll do it to escape a daughter he can't look at without seeing his dead wife. He'll do it because being her father again is easier than being alone forever. The theory says that somewhere out there, in a dimension we've never seen, a little girl named Beth came downstairs one morning and found her father's body. And that dimension's Rick, who had already lost his Diane and couldn't bear it anymore, left her alone with that. And then our Rick, who had also lost his Diane, who was bouncing through realities trying to find one where his family might still be intact, found that dimension, found the empty chair at the kitchen table, found a Beth with no father, and he sat down in that chair and never said a word about who he really was. Every father-daughter moment in the entire show, if this theory is true, is a lie. Every time Beth calls him dad, she is calling a stranger dad. Every time Rick makes her breakfast or helps her with a problem, he is playing the role of a man whose corpse is buried in another universe. And the reason Rick is so distant, the reason he can't fully commit to his family, the reason he keeps himself at arm's length, the reason he drinks himself unconscious, might not be because he doesn't love them. It might be because he knows every single day that he doesn't have the right to be there. Now, I want to be fair to you. I want to be honest about where this stands. The show has never confirmed this. The show has never denied it either. What the show has done across 7 seasons is show us repeatedly that Ricks swap lives, that Ricks replace dead Ricks, that Ricks bury their own bodies without losing sleep over it. The mechanism for this theory is already canon. The question is whether it has happened inside this specific family. And here is the detail I want to leave you with. The detail that makes me think there might be something to this. In season 5, the episode Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Rick enters Birdperson's memories, and he runs into a younger version of himself, his own memory, a Rick from his own past. And the younger Rick looks at the older Rick and is disgusted. The younger Rick insults him, tells him he has become one of the pathetic Ricks. The Ricks who move in with abandoned Beths, the Ricks who pretend to be the father of dead daughters. Our Rick doesn't deny it, our Rick doesn't correct him, our Rick just stands there and takes it, because the younger Rick is right. That is exactly what our Rick did. And the show is telling us in that one moment that somewhere in the multiverse, there is a dead Beth who was Rick's original daughter. And the Beth we know, the Beth we have watched for 7 seasons, is, by Rick's own younger self's words, a replacement for a girl who didn't make it. If the original Rick of this family really did kill himself, then the Beth he left behind would be one of those abandoned Beths. And our Rick, who moved in and took the chair, would fit the younger Rick's insult perfectly. The pieces fit. They just fit in the darkest possible way. This is why the theory has stayed alive for almost a decade. It doesn't rely on wild guesses. It relies on things the show has already admitted. Ricks replace Ricks. Ricks move in without telling anyone. Ricks are in constant pain. And one specific Rick, ours, has a habit of looking at his own corpse without blinking. The scene in Ricksty Minutes where Morty tells Summer the truth about the backyard graves ends with one of the most famous quotes in the entire series. Morty tells Summer that nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's going to die. Come watch TV. Most people hear those lines and think Morty is quoting Rick's worldview. But if this theory is right, Morty isn't quoting anyone. Morty is describing his situation. He actually doesn't exist on purpose anymore. He doesn't actually belong in this family. Everybody around him is a stranger, wearing the faces of the people he used to love. And the grandfather, sitting in the garage, who he thinks is teaching him about the universe, is doing it from the other side of the same wound. 2 strangers, both pretending, both burying people in the yard, both trying not to look too closely at each other, because if they do, they might have to admit that neither of them should be there. That is the theory. That is the version of the show you can't watch the same way once you've heard it. Every smile Rick gives Beth becomes heavier. Every time Beth says she loves her dad becomes tragic, because the father she is talking to didn't raise her. The father who raised her is in the ground somewhere, under a different sky, in a world we will never see. And here's what really turns the knife. If Rick isn't her original father, then Beth has no idea. She has spent her entire adult life trying to earn the love of a man who stepped into her life as a trespasser. Her deepest wound, her fear that her father will leave her again, is built on top of a lie, because the father she's afraid of losing already left once, permanently. And the man she's terrified of losing now is someone she's never actually met. But even if you don't fully buy this one, even if you think it's a stretch, stretch. Even if you need more evidence before you can accept that our Rick is a body snatcher who pretends to be a dad, there is still the deeper problem that the show has never escaped. Because Rick is, by every measurable standard, a man who wishes he wasn't alive. He has tried to end himself on screen. He has described his own catchphrase as a cry for help. He has stood at the edge more than once, and the only reason he is still here is that Morty keeps yanking him back. And if that's true of our Rick, if our Rick is this close to the edge, then somewhere out there, in the infinite versions of himself that the show has built its entire universe on, at least one of them would have stopped being yanked back. At least one of them would have stepped off. At least one of them would have left a daughter behind. Maybe more than one. Maybe a lot more than one. Which raises a question the show refuses to touch directly. If Rick is the kind of man who replaces dead Ricks without losing sleep, and if Ricks are killing themselves constantly across the multiverse, then how many of the Ricks still alive right now in homes just like this one are replacements? How many Beths are being raised by men who aren't their fathers? How many Mortys are going on adventures with men who stole their grandfather's life? And then the last question, the one that lands hardest. How would any of those Beths ever know? They wouldn't. They never would. Because the whole point is that a replacement Rick is good at the job. He knows everything the original knew. He remembers the birthdays. He tells the old stories. He plays the part. And unless the family happens to find a grave in the yard, there is no test they could run that would catch him. Beth will never know. Morty will never know. Summer will never know. We might never know. The only people who would know are the Ricks themselves. And they are, all of them, professionally committed to never talking about it. So the theory leaves you with this. A man in a garage. A daughter who loves him more than anything. A daughter who has no idea that the man she loves might not be the man who rocked her to sleep as a baby. And a grandfather who looks at that daughter every day and has to choose, over and over, whether to tell her the truth or to drink another flask and keep pretending. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That's dark enough to end on, but it's not where the darkness stops. Because if our Rick isn't the original of this family, then the question becomes, who else at that dinner table isn't who we think they are? And there is one other person in that house who has been there from the start. One person who is supposed to be the most innocent of all. One person whose entire identity might be a cover for something the multiverse has been hiding since the very first episode. And his name starts with an M. Section 2. Evil Morty is the original Morty. We just ended on a question. If our Rick might not be who he says he is, then who else at that dinner table is hiding something? And the answer, if you follow the trail of breadcrumbs the show has been dropping since the first season, leads to the boy in the yellow shirt. The one we trust completely. The one we have been watching for over a decade. Morty. Not our Morty exactly. Or maybe, yes, exactly our Morty. Depending on which version of this theory you believe. Let me explain. There is a character in Rick and Morty who only shows up a handful of times across the whole series. You know him. You have seen him. He wears a black eye patch. He carries himself differently than every other Morty. He moves with purpose. He kills without hesitating. He has a plan that took years to set in motion, and he is the only character in the entire show who has ever actually outsmarted Rick. His name, as the fans call him, is Evil Morty. And for a very long time, a huge portion of the fandom believed, and many still believe, that Evil Morty is not some random Morty from a random dimension. Evil Morty is the original Morty, the very first Morty that our Rick ever had. And the reason he is called evil is because our Rick did something to him, or tried to do something to him, or abandoned him, and he has spent the rest of his life planning revenge. This theory was first written down properly by a Reddit user named Crazy Flips, and it blew up across the internet for one very simple reason. It makes too much sense. The pieces fit too cleanly. The show has dropped too many hints for it to be an accident. Let me walk you through the hints, one at a time. First, the baby photo. In the Season 2 episode, Get Swifty, we see a photograph on the wall at Birdperson's house. The photo is of a younger Rick holding a baby. The baby is wearing a yellow shirt. The baby is Morty. This photo is also seen in Season 1, in Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, when a Rick is going through our Rick's memories. Our Rick holding a baby Morty years ago. This seems sweet at first, until you remember what the show has told us about the timeline. Rick has been gone from Beth's life for 20 years. He disappeared before Morty was born. He only came back to the Smith family at the very start of the series. Morty, at that point, was 14 years old. So how is there a photograph of Rick holding a baby Morty? That photo could not exist. Not unless Rick was holding a different Morty. A Morty from a different reality. A Morty from before. A Morty who came first. And that first Morty, according to the theory, is the boy in the eye patch. Second, the opening credits. Go back and watch the opening sequence of the show, the one that plays before every episode. There is a shot in that sequence where Rick runs through a portal and leaves Morty behind. Morty is standing there, alone, as the portal closes. Then the scene cuts to hostile frog creatures attacking him. Rick just leaves. He does not come back. For years, fans brush this off as a joke, a silly opening credits gag, but the show never does anything without a reason. Every visual choice is on purpose, and if you take that image seriously, it is showing you something. It is showing you Rick abandoning a Morty who, in the official version of events, is never mentioned. A Morty who may have survived. A Morty who may have come back, older, colder, with an eye patch. Third, the music. This is the one that sealed it for a lot of fans. There is a song called For the Damaged Coda by a band named Blonde Redhead. It is one of the saddest pieces of music ever used in an animated show, and the show has played that song exactly twice in a way that matters. The first time was in the season 1 finale, Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. At the end of that episode, the eye patch Morty is revealed to have been the real mastermind behind the whole plot. As he walks away, that song plays. Slow, painful, heartbreaking. The second time was in a season 3 episode called The Ricklantis Mix-Up, when evil Morty makes his return and wins a fake election to take over the Citadel of Ricks. That same song plays again, the exact same piece. Both scenes belong to evil Morty. No other character in the show has ever been given that song. The song is his. The show is telling you, through the music alone, that this is the same character, and that his story is a sad one. Not a villain story, a sad one. The kind of sad that comes from loss. The kind of sad that comes from being left behind. Fourth, the drink. There is a moment in the season 3 finale where evil Morty, after killing the entire Shadow Council, sits down at his desk. He pours himself a drink. Not juice, not soda, whiskey. He drinks it like he has done it 1,000 times before. Like it is a normal part of his day. No other Morty drinks. Our Morty has never touched alcohol in the whole show. The only person in the show who drinks like that constantly, out of habit, is Rick. Our Rick. If evil Morty spent his early years with a Rick, living with a Rick, raised by a Rick, he would have picked up Rick's habits. He would pour himself a drink the way Rick does, because he learned from Rick, because Rick was his whole world for a long time. Fifth, the intelligence. Every other Morty in the show is, to put it bluntly, not very sharp. They fumble, they panic, they trip over their own feet. This is by design. The show has told us that a dumb Morty is useful to Rick because a dumb Morty can hide a Rick's brainwaves from the rest of the galaxy. A Morty is a cloaking device. Mortys are supposed to be simple, so Rick's can stay hidden, but evil Morty is not simple. Evil Morty is brilliant. He builds his own portal gun. He hacks into a Rick's mind and downloads his memories. He plans a political campaign for years. He manipulates hundreds of Ricks and hundreds of Mortys into doing exactly what he needs them to do. He is, by any measure, smarter than almost every Rick on the Citadel. That kind of intelligence does not come from nothing. That kind of intelligence comes from time. From being around a smart person long enough to learn how they think. From growing up in the shadow of a genius and slowly, quietly becoming his equal. The theory says that is exactly what happened. The theory says that a long time ago, in a dimension we have never seen, Rick did not abandon his family right away. He stayed. He raised his grandson. He taught him things. He took him on adventures. And somewhere along the way, the grandson got too good. He started thinking for himself. He started questioning Rick. He started being right more often than Rick was comfortable with. And at some point, Rick realized he had made a monster. A small, sharp, dangerous version of himself. A Morty who could eventually replace him. A Morty who, if allowed to grow, would out-science, out-scheme, and out-Rick the real Rick. And so Rick left. Or Rick tried to kill him. Or Rick abandoned him somewhere he thought the boy couldn't survive. And then Rick went looking for a new, dumber Morty in a different reality. Our Morty. The safe one. The one who would stay dumb forever. Except the original Morty did survive. And he has been coming for Rick ever since. Now, I have to be honest with you here. The show, at the end of season 5, seemed to contradict this theory. In the season 5 finale, Rick Mirai Jack, evil Morty tells Rick directly that Rick's real first Morty died. Died in a car crash with Rick's wife and baby daughter back when Rick was younger. That, according to evil Morty's version of events, is not who he is. A lot of people saw that scene and thought the theory was dead. The show had officially said it. Evil Morty is not the original Morty. Case closed. But here is the thing. Evil Morty is a liar. Evil Morty has lied to every character he has ever spoken to. He lied to Rick for years by pretending to be a servant. He lied to the Citadel by pretending to be a campaign assistant. Lying is the only thing he does with more skill than planning. And in that same scene, scene where he explains Rick's backstory, he also says something that most fans missed the first time. He says that he got all of this information by downloading Rick's memories. But Rick's memories are not reliable. Rick has, on multiple occasions, made fake memories to fool people, including himself. So either Evil Morty is telling the truth and the original Morty died as a baby, or Evil Morty is showing Rick and Morty a version of the backstory that Rick himself planted. Or Evil Morty is simply lying, the way he always does, because letting Rick know his real identity would give Rick power over him. The show has left the door open, on purpose, because a good mystery is worth more alive than dead. And there is one more detail that keeps the theory breathing, a moment most fans skipped past. At the end of the Season 1 episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, our Rick gives our Morty a warning. He tells our Morty to be careful. He tells him not to get too smart. He tells him that getting too smart would be very, very bad for him. Morty asks what he means. Rick says he will explain when Morty is older. He never does. That line is planted there for a reason. That line is Rick speaking to Morty with full knowledge of what happens to Mortys who become too clever. He knows. He has seen it. He has lived it. Maybe he has done it. And if that line is a warning, it is a warning from a man who is afraid. A man who has already watched one Morty outgrow him. A man who is very quietly making sure it never happens again. Now let me get to the part of this theory that really makes you uncomfortable. If Evil Morty really is the original, if Rick really did raise him and then leave him or try to end him, then every single moment between our Rick and our Morty means something different. Our Morty is a replacement. Our Morty is the do-over. Our Morty is the one Rick picked because he was safe, because he would stay dumb, because he would never become a threat. And that means every time Rick pushes Morty around, every time Rick insults him, every time Rick calls him stupid or slow or useless, Rick isn't just being cruel. Rick is enforcing something. Rick is making sure this Morty never wakes up, never starts thinking for himself, never starts questioning the adventures, never starts noticing patterns. Because the last time Rick had a Morty who noticed patterns, it ended with an eye patch and a revenge plan that took decades to build. Every tender moment between Rick and our Morty becomes a little bit colder through this lens. Rick isn't protecting Morty. Rick is keeping him small. Rick loves him only as long as Morty stays the version of himself that can't threaten Rick. The minute our Morty got too clever, our Morty would meet the same fate as the one who came before. And here is the darkest piece of the whole theory. The piece that sits with you after the video ends. Evil Morty, when he finally makes his big speech in the Citadel, tells the audience the truth about the multiverse. He tells them that all of reality was built around Rick, that every Morty has been trapped in a prison designed for one man's ego. And then he breaks out of that prison. He leaves. He goes somewhere Rick cannot follow. If he is the original Morty, if he really is the boy Rick raised and then threw away, then that whole escape is not a villain's plan. It is a son's goodbye. A son who realized, too late, that his grandfather never really loved him. His grandfather built a whole universe to make himself feel smart. His grandfather made infinite copies of him to use as shields. His grandfather would do the same thing again tomorrow without blinking. And the only thing that little boy could do, after years of watching all of it, was build a door out of the nightmare, walk through it, and make sure his grandfather could never, ever touch him again. He didn't want to kill Rick. He just wanted to leave. That is the saddest version of this story. That Evil Morty is not evil at all. Evil Morty is just the first person who ever looked at Rick clearly and said, I do not want you in my life anymore. And for Rick, a man who cannot stand the idea of being left, a man who built an entire multiverse to stop himself from ever being alone, that might actually be the worst thing anyone has ever done to him. So there it is, a boy in an eye patch, a grandfather who cannot stop drinking, a multiverse built around one man's fear of being caught, and a song that plays every time the truth starts to show through the cracks. If this theory is right, Rick has been running from Evil Morty since the first episode, and Rick, who we have been trained to see as the hero, might actually be the reason any of this is happening in the first place. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But abandoning one grandson to chase a safer one is not where the cruelty ends. Because before Rick ever had a Morty to replace, he had a daughter. A daughter he walked out on. A daughter who spent 20 years believing he left because of something she did. And there is a theory going around that says Rick's decision to disappear from Beth's life when she was a little girl was not an accident, was not a crisis, was not grief, was something Rick planned from the start. And the reason he planned it will make you question question every hug he has ever given her. Section 3. Rick abandoned Beth on purpose to engineer a Morty. We just ended on the idea that Rick might have planned his disappearance from Beth's life, that his 20-year absence was not a broken man running from his grief, that it was something much colder, something designed. This is the theory that takes what we think we know about Rick and turns it inside out. Because if it is true, then Rick is not just a bad father. Rick is something else entirely. Rick is a man who used his own daughter as a tool, who treated her whole life like a step in a plan, who looked at a little girl and saw, instead of a child, a piece of machinery he needed to build. Let me walk you through what the theory actually says. It comes from a Reddit user named GHYTRF, and it starts with a piece of information the show has made very clear over multiple seasons. Mortys are cloaking devices. That is not a fan guess. That is something the show has stated out loud more than once. When a Rick walks around the universe, every enemy he has ever made is looking for him. The Galactic Federation, rival Ricks, aliens he has wronged, monsters he has stolen from. All of them are scanning for Rick's brainwaves. Rick's specific, genius, recognizable mind. And if they found him, they would kill him. So Rick does something clever. Rick keeps a Morty nearby at all times. A Morty's brainwaves are the exact opposite of a Rick's brainwaves. The two cancel each other out. Walking around with a Morty is like carrying an invisibility cloak. As long as the Morty is there, the Rick cannot be tracked. This is canon. This is explained in the show. This is the reason Rick drags Morty on every adventure in the first place. Which brings us to the dark question. If Mortys are so important, if Mortys are the only thing standing between Rick and every enemy he has ever made, then how did Rick make sure he would have one? The answer, according to this theory, is that he planned for it. All of it. Going back 20 years. Here is how the theory works, step by step. Rick, being the smartest man in his corner of the universe, can predict things most people cannot. He can look at a situation and see, with very high accuracy, how it will unfold. He can run the numbers. He can see the future in ways a normal person cannot. So when Rick looked at his young daughter Beth, the theory says, he did not just see his little girl. He saw a timeline. He saw a future. He saw the exact steps that would need to happen in order for her to eventually produce the kind of child he would need. And the first step was leaving. The theory says Rick walked out on Beth when she was young because he knew what it would do to her. He knew she would grow up with a hole in her heart. He knew she would develop deep abandonment issues. He knew she would, without realizing why, be drawn to the kind of man who would never leave her. Not because he loved her, not because he was strong, but because he was too weak to ever go anywhere. That man, of course, was Jerry. Beth did not marry Jerry because he was her great love. Beth has said out loud in multiple episodes that she settled, that she gave up, that she chose him because he got her pregnant in high school and she was too scared to be alone. She stayed with him because he was safe. He would never abandon her the way her father did. And here is where the theory goes from cold to freezing, because the theory says this was Rick's plan from the start. He did not just leave because he was sad. He left because he needed Beth to feel abandoned. He needed her to rush into a marriage with someone exactly like Jerry. Because only Jerry, specifically Jerry, mixed with Beth's specific genes, would produce the kind of grandchild Rick needed. He needed a Morty. A Morty is not just any grandson. A Morty is a very specific combination of DNA. A Morty comes from a Beth and a Jerry. A Morty requires a mother with a certain intelligence and a father with a certain slowness. A Morty is a blend. And Rick, who has studied the multiverse, who has seen countless versions of his family, knows exactly what blend produces the best cloaking device. So Rick engineered it. He pushed Beth toward the man who would give him what he needed. He disappeared from her life at exactly the age when abandonment creates the deepest scars. He let her go through her teen years alone, angry, looking for someone who would stay. And when Jerry came along, Rick let her marry him. He let her have Summer. He let her have Morty. And only then, once the Morty was born and old enough to be useful, did Rick come back. 20 years. He was gone for 20 years. The exact amount of time it would take for a baby Beth to become a woman, meet Jerry, get pregnant twice, and raise a 14-year-old son. And when Rick finally came back, what is the first thing he did? He took that 14-year-old boy out of the house. He started dragging him on adventures. He started taking him everywhere. He made the boy his shadow, because that is what Rick had built him for. Now think about what this means. Think about what it really means. Every hug Rick has ever given Beth, every smile, every time he called her sweetie, every time he told her she was smart, every time he made her breakfast or fixed her problem or stood up for her. All of it, if this theory is true, is part of a long con. A con so long that Rick started playing it before Beth could walk. He did not love her. He needed her. Those are not the same thing. And here is the detail that makes the theory worse. The one that makes your stomach turn. Summer. Summer, the older sister, the granddaughter. She has her own role in the theory, and it is just as cold. In Season 3, the show reveals that a grown Summer can also act as a cloaking device. Her brainwaves work too. She is not as strong a cloak as a Morty, but she works. And this is the part of the theory that makes people go quiet when they first hear it. If Rick knew Summer would also work as a cloak, and he planned all of this carefully, then Rick planned for two. He did not want just one cloaking device. He wanted a spare. He wanted a backup. He wanted insurance. Because what if something happened to Morty? What if Morty died on an adventure? What if Morty finally broke? Rick needed a second option, and the second option was Summer. So Rick timed everything to get both of them. He left Beth young enough that she would be desperate to settle. He came back after she had finished having kids. Both of them. Summer, the first, Morty, the second. 2 jammers, 2 shields, 2 tools. All produced by a daughter who thought her father had just been lost somewhere in space. She thought he came back because he missed her. The theory says he came back because the products were ready. There is one more piece to this that I want to talk about. Because if you only take the theory at face value, you might think Rick was a genius the whole time. But the truth is more uncomfortable than that. Rick is not perfect. Rick has feelings. Rick has over and over across 7 seasons shown that he does love his family. At least a little bit. Even when he is trying not to. So how do you reconcile that with a man who planned his grandson's birth as a weapon? The answer the theory gives, and this is the part that sticks with you, is that Rick does love them, but he loved them second. The plan came first. The feelings came later. Rick engineered a grandson to be a shield, and then, somewhere along the way, he started to actually care about the shield. He started to actually care about his daughter. He started to actually enjoy being a grandfather. But the plan still happened. The cold math at the start of it all is still true. Rick walked away from a little girl on purpose, for a reason, and that reason was not love. The love came after, and only because his plan happened to work. Which means the warmest moments in the show, the rare moments where Rick lets his guard down, where he almost says something kind, where he risks his life to save one of them, are not proof that he is secretly a good man. They are proof that he got lucky, that his tools turned into a family, that his weapons turned into people he cares about, and that he might even be surprised by it. But underneath all of it, always, is the original sin, the first choice, the decision to walk out on a child so that his own life could run a certain way. Now let us talk about what the show has actually shown us to support this theory, because a theory is only worth something if the show has left clues. Clue 1, the exact length of Rick's absence, 20 years. In the pilot episode, it is stated that Rick has been gone for 20 years. Beth is in her 30s. Do the math backward. He left when she was a young girl, old enough to remember him, old enough to be wounded by his leaving, young enough that it would shape the rest of her life. That is not a random timeline. That is a precise surgical strike on her emotional development. Clue 2, his perfect timing. Rick shows up right at the moment when his grandson is old enough to be useful on adventures. Not when Morty is a baby, not when Morty is a toddler, exactly when Morty is 14. Old enough to survive dangerous missions, young enough to be easily controlled, young enough to still trust an adult without asking questions. That is not a coincidence. That is a man waiting for a product to finish cooking. Clue 3, his behavior around his wife, Diane. In flashbacks and memories, Rick has shown genuine grief about losing Diane. He did love her, we know that. But here's the thing. If Rick loved Diane that much, and if he lost her that badly, then walking away from her daughter, the last piece of Diane he had left in the universe, makes no sense. Unless he had a reason to leave that was more important than his grief. Unless he had a goal. Unless he had a plan. Clue 4, his treatment of Jerry. Rick has always hated Jerry. Treats him like garbage. Mocks him constantly. Tries to get Beth to divorce him multiple times. But here is the catch. Rick needs Jerry. Jerry is the genetic ingredient that makes Morty possible. Without Jerry, no Morty. And Rick knows this better than anyone. So why does Rick hate him so much? The theory's answer is chilling. Rick hates Jerry because Jerry is a reminder. Every time Rick looks at Jerry, he sees what he had to do to his daughter. He sees the pathetic man he pushed her toward. He sees the proof of his own betrayal. Jerry is not the enemy. Jerry is the mirror. And Rick cannot stand mirrors. Clue 5, the moment Beth almost figures it out. In a season 3 episode called The ABCs of Beth, Beth confronts Rick about her childhood. She tells him something very specific. She tells him she thinks there is something wrong with her, that she has always felt different, that she is cold in a way most people are not. And Rick, for once, does not deny it. Rick admits it. He tells her she takes after him. He tells her she is like him. Watch that scene again through the lens of this theory. Rick is not confessing to being a bad father. Rick is confessing to something much bigger. He is admitting that he shaped her, that she is a version of him he built, that the coldness inside her, the thing that scares her about herself, came from him on purpose. Because a daughter who is cold will be easier to use than a daughter who is warm. A cold daughter will not question him. A cold daughter will let him take the kids on adventures without stopping him. A cold daughter is part of the design. This is why, after 7 seasons, Beth has never actually broken free from her father. Why she keeps letting him back in. Why she keeps defending him. Why she chooses him over her husband, over her own children, over her own happiness. The theory says she cannot leave him because she was built not to. Her very nature, the wiring of who she is, was shaped by the man who walked away from her, specifically so that when he came back, she would welcome him. She is not just his daughter, she is his creation. And the saddest part is, she does not know it. So there it is, a little girl who was left on purpose, a marriage that was engineered, 2 grandchildren who were born to be used, a grandfather who built a family the way other people build machines, and a love, if you can even call it love, that only started happening by accident, long after the plan had already worked. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. If our Rick is this calculated, if he can plan 20 years ahead just to get a grandson, then it makes you wonder how he became this smart in the first place. Because the Rick we see in the show is not just smart, he is inhumanly smart, impossibly smart, smart beyond what any human being should be capable of. And there is a theory, growing stronger with every season, that says Rick's intelligence is not real, that it is not his, that it is something he puts into his body every day, over and over, to keep himself sharp. And if he ever runs out of it, he is just a man, a broken, grieving, ordinary man. And the thing in his flask is not what you think it is. Section 4. Rick's intelligence is a drug, and he's an addict. We ended the last section on a question. How did Rick get this smart? Because the Rick we watch every week is not just a smart guy. He is not a genius in the normal sense. He is on a whole different level. He builds machines that bend space and time. He outthinks aliens who have existed for millions of years. He invents things that should not be possible. And the show, very quietly, has given us clues that this kind of mind does not come for free. The theory goes like this. Rick is not naturally a super genius. Rick is a pretty smart guy, sure, above average. But the version of Rick we see on screen, the one who solves every problem in 30 seconds, the one who is always 3 steps ahead of everyone else, is that smart because of what is inside his flask? And the thing inside his flask is not alcohol, or at least not only alcohol. It is something much older, something much rarer, something he forces his grandson to smuggle for him in ways that still make people uncomfortable to think about. Let me take you back to the very first episode of the entire show, the pilot. You remember it. Rick crashes into the Smith family's garage. He is drunk and loud and chaotic. He grabs Morty and takes him on an adventure. And the mission for that adventure? The whole reason Rick is dragging a 14-year-old boy through a monster-filled alien dimension is to collect something called megatree seeds. Or, as Rick sometimes calls them, mega seeds. These seeds, Rick explains, are the most valuable thing in the universe. He needs them. He needs them badly enough to risk his grandson's life. And at the end of that first adventure, there is a moment that most people laughed at when they first saw it and then never thought about again. Morty has the seeds. Rick tells him he has to hide them. Morty asks where. Rick tells him to shove them up a place that no customs officer would ever search. Morty has to smuggle them inside his own body past the airport authorities. This is played for comedy. Morty, crying and shaking, fumbles through the scanner with the seeds hidden inside him, but the scanners catch him anyway. The seeds dissolve inside his body, and something very strange happens. Morty, normally a nervous, slow, stuttering kid, suddenly becomes brilliant. His eyes go wide. He stares at the officers and speaks in complete, confident, genius-level sentences. He solves problems. He explains things. He makes intelligent arguments. Just for a moment, Morty stops being Morty. Morty becomes a little bit like Rick. And then, just as quickly, the effect wears off. The seeds finish dissolving. Morty drops back into his normal self. He drools. He trembles. He struggles to form sentences. The seeds are gone, and so is the intelligence they gave him. Now, here is where the theory begins. If a few dissolved mega seeds can turn a dumb 14-year-old boy into a temporary genius, what do you think is happening to a man who has been drinking from a flask every single day for decades? The theory says Rick's flask is not full of whiskey, or at least it is not only whiskey. The theory says says Rick's flask contains dissolved megaseed concentrate, or something very similar, and Rick has been sipping from that flask constantly for as long as we have known him. He sips during conversations, he sips during fights, he sips before he does math, he sips before he builds inventions, he sips right before the exact moments when his brain has to perform miracles. He is not drinking because he is an alcoholic, or at least not only because he is an alcoholic. He is drinking because his brain cannot work without it. He is dosing himself every single day, all day long. And if that flask were ever to run dry, the genius we have watched for 7 seasons would be gone. And here's the proof. Watch the show again. Watch what happens to Morty after the seeds dissolve. Morty drools. Now watch Rick. Rick drools constantly. Rick has drool running down his chin in almost every single episode. It has become so normal that fans have treated it as a character trait, like it is just part of who Rick is, a gross old man with bad hygiene. But it is not a character trait. It is a side effect. Megaseeds, when they dissolve inside a body, cause drooling. The show confirmed this with Morty in the very first episode. And if Rick is dosing himself with seed concentrate constantly, then Rick would drool constantly, which is exactly what he does. Every episode, every scene. That green line running down his chin is not a joke. It is evidence. And it gets worse. Because if you look closely at Rick's drool, in multiple episodes, it is the same color as the liquid inside his flask. A strange, slightly green, slightly blue color. Not the color of normal spit, the color of what he drinks. It is leaking out of him. The stuff he is putting in is coming back out, and it is the same color both ways. That is not a coincidence. That is a clue the show has been placing in plain sight since the very first scene. Now let me talk about what this really means, because if the theory is right, a lot of other things start making sense. First, the flask is always with him. Always. Rick will lose weapons. Rick will lose his portal gun. Rick will lose his grandson. Rick has been known to lose entire planets, but he never, ever loses his flask. Across hundreds of adventures, he has never set it down and forgotten it. He keeps it on his body at all times, like it is the most important thing he owns. A man who is an alcoholic does not usually care which container his alcohol comes from. An alcoholic will drink from any bottle. An alcoholic just needs the alcohol itself. But Rick cares about the specific flask. He refills the specific flask. He cleans it. He guards it. He has never switched it out for a different one. That is not alcoholism. That is medicine. That is a man who has a very specific treatment he needs in a very specific container, and he cannot risk losing access to it for even a moment. Second, Rick panics when the flask is empty. There are multiple moments across the show where Rick has to deal with being out of his drink, and he does not handle it like a normal person runs out of a drink. He gets jumpy. He gets nervous. He gets angry in a way that is out of character for him. If it were just alcohol, he could sober up, sleep it off, and be fine. But Rick does not get fine. Rick gets worse when the flask is empty, because without the flask, his brain is not working at full power. Without the flask, he is just a regular old man. And for Rick, being a regular old man is the scariest thing in the universe. Third, the rarity of the seeds. The show has told us that mega seeds are extremely hard to find. Rick does not get them from a store. He has to travel to dangerous alien dimensions and fight monsters and risk his life to get them. Which raises a question. If the seeds were only worth money, Rick could just stop collecting them. He has plenty of ways to make money, but he keeps going after them anyway, across seasons, at great personal risk. Why? Because he needs them. He cannot buy them. He cannot make them. He cannot live without them. And so, every so often, when the supply runs low, he grabs his grandson, opens a portal, and goes out to harvest more. Morty thinks they are on a fun adventure. Rick is actually on a supply run. The scariest part of this theory is what it means for everyone else in Rick's life. If Rick is not actually a super genius, and if his powers come from a rare alien drug, then every person who trusts him is trusting a lie. Morty thinks his grandfather is the smartest man in the universe. Beth thinks her father is a legend. Summer looks up to him. The family has shaped its entire life around the idea that Rick can solve any problem, fix any mistake, and save them from any danger. But if his flask runs dry, none of that is true anymore. He is just an old man in a lab coat. He cannot outthink the enemies chasing him. He cannot build the weapons that keep the family alive. He cannot escape the dangers he has been dragging everyone into for years. And Rick knows this. Rick has always known this. Every moment of his life, for as long as the show has been running, Rick has been walking around with a secret ticking clock in his chest. A clock that counts down every sip. A clock that reminds him every single day that his intelligence is borrowed, that his power is temporary, that the version of himself his family loves is only a few flasks breaths away from disappearing. This is why Rick drinks so fast. Not because he likes the taste, not because he is running from pain, though he is running from pain too. He drinks fast because the clock is always running, because the next crisis could come any second, and he needs his brain sharp when it arrives. He cannot afford to be underdosed during an adventure, so he sips constantly, keeping his levels steady, keeping the genius turned on. And here is the part of the theory that really makes you sad. Rick hates this. He has to. Think about it. Think about what it would be like to know that everything people love about you is a drug, that the admiration, the respect, the fear, the intelligence, all of it came out of a plant you stole from a dimension that tried to kill you. That without that plant, you are nothing. That you cannot even enjoy a quiet moment with your grandson without sipping from your flask to keep yourself from becoming someone smaller. Every tender moment in the show, if this theory is true, is happening through a haze of dependency. Rick cannot be fully present with his family because his brain is never his own anymore. It is always partly a seed, always partly something he is forcing into himself to stay who they think he is, and he can never stop. He can never step away. He can never try to recover, because the second he tries, the second he pours out the flask and decides to face life sober, his enemies will find him. The Galactic Federation, the other Ricks, every alien he has ever cheated or killed or stolen from, all of them will catch up. And without his genius, he will have no defense. So he keeps drinking forever. Not because he enjoys it, because the alternative is death for him, for Morty, for Beth, for Summer, for Jerry. Every single person he has ever pretended to protect is only alive because Rick keeps sipping, keeps drooling, keeps the machine running. And Morty, poor Morty. Every time Rick asks him to go on an adventure, every time Rick opens a portal and drags him out the door, there is a part of that adventure, often the most important part, that is about refilling the flask, about getting more seeds, about keeping Grandpa high enough to keep the family alive. Morty does not know. Morty has no idea that the trauma he experiences on these adventures is because his grandfather is feeding a habit. Morty thinks they are saving the universe. Morty thinks they are doing good. But if the theory is right, most of what they do is the space version of driving Grandpa to the pharmacy. The worst scene in the whole show, through this lens, is the scene we started with, the pilot. The moment Rick forces Morty, crying and terrified, to carry the seeds on his person. A 14-year-old boy, used to transport something he does not understand, by his own grandfather, on their very first day together. That is not a wacky introduction to a fun grandpa. That is the first chapter of a long story about a man addicted to something so badly that he is willing to put his grandson in a harmful situation to get it. And Morty goes along with it because he does not know any better. He wants to be loved. He wants his grandfather to think he is cool. He wants to be useful. So he takes the seeds. He walks through the scanner. He becomes part of the plan. And when the seeds take effect, he briefly feels what his grandfather feels every day. A flash of real intelligence. A moment of clarity. A taste of what Rick has to rely on constantly, just to be the man everyone thinks he is. Then it is gone. Morty goes back to being Morty, and Rick goes back to his flask. Some fans have pushed the theory even further. They point out that if Rick needs the seeds to be smart, and if the seeds are made from a rare plant in a dangerous dimension, then Rick is one bad day away from losing everything. One botched harvest, one stolen flask, one missed dose, and the whole house of cards collapses. The family loses their protector, the universe loses its genius, and Rick loses the only thing that has ever made him feel like anything at all. That is a lonely way to live. Every high is the same as the last one. Every drop is precious. Every empty flask is a small death. And behind all of it, the thing Rick is actually running from is not his enemies and not his grief. It is the moment when the seeds stop working, the moment when the drug fails, the moment when Rick has to face the world with his own actual brain, his own actual feelings, his own actual self. He has been running from that moment for so long that he has forgotten what his real self even looks like. So maybe the Rick we know is not Rick at all. Maybe the Rick we know is the seed, the flask, the habit. And the real Rick, the one underneath all of it, is a man who stopped existing a long time ago and has been hiding behind a chemical ever since. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now here's a thought to carry with you into what comes next. If Rick's genius is a drug, if his whole life is a chemical trick, then how would he even know what is real anymore? How would any of us know what is real? What if the whole show, the whole universe, the whole Smith family, the whole multiverse is not actually real in the way we have been told it is? What if the entire thing Rick and Morty live inside is a fake, a setup, a cage someone built around them that they have never once realized they were in. Because there is a theory that takes this show, every episode, every adventure, every laugh, and every tear, and flips it into something you are not going to want to think about after the credits roll. Section 5. The Roy video game proves we're all in a simulation. We ended on a strange idea that maybe the whole show, the whole universe, the whole Smith family is not actually real. That maybe Rick and Morty are trapped inside something fake and they do not even know it. You might think that sounds silly. You might think I am stretching, but I am not stretching at all. The show itself, on screen, with its own hands, has shown you exactly how a universe full of people who feel real, who love each other, who fight wars and fall in love and have children, can fit inside a machine the size of a drink cooler. And once you see how it works, you will never look at Rick and Morty the same way again. Let me tell you about the Roy video game. Back in Season 2, in an episode called Morty Night Run, Rick and Morty go to an alien arcade called Blips and Chits. It is a fun, dumb, colorful place full of weird games. And one of those games is a virtual reality machine. You put on a helmet, you sit in a chair, and you become somebody else. The game is called Roy, A Life Well Lived. Here is how it works. When you put the helmet on, you stop being yourself completely. Your name, your memories, your family, your whole life, they all just fade away. And you become Roy. You are born as a baby. You grow up in a small town. You play football in high school. You get a girlfriend. You get a job. You go to work. You live every single day, one at a time, from birth to death. And the goal of the game is to keep Roy alive for as long as possible. Morty puts on the helmet. He becomes Roy. He lives an entire life. He gets married. He has a family. He works in a carpet store. He grows old. And then, at 55 years old, he falls off a ladder and dies in that carpet store. His life ends. The helmet comes off, and Morty sits up, blinks, and he is back in the arcade, a teenager again, with no real injuries. The whole thing, from Roy being born to Roy dying, took about 15 minutes in the real world. Now stop. Think about that. 15 minutes. That is less time than it takes to microwave a frozen dinner and eat it. And inside that 15 minutes, a man lived an entire human life. Birthdays, first kisses, weddings, funerals, 55 years of real, felt, full experience, all inside a machine, all for a few coins. But that is not the scary part. That is just the setup. The scary part is what the show revealed about the Roy game 4 seasons later. In Season 6, in an episode called Rick, A Mort Well Lived, the show comes back to the arcade. Morty is playing Roy again when something goes wrong. Some alien terrorists attack the arcade. The power flickers, the game glitches, and Morty's mind gets shattered into pieces. Not just one Roy. His consciousness splits apart and spreads itself out across every single character inside the game. Not just the main character, every single person walking around in Roy's town. And here is where the show drops the bomb. The game has more than 5 billion people inside it. Not 5 billion simple puppets, 5 billion full, thinking, feeling people. Each one of them, once Morty's mind entered them, became aware, started asking questions, started forming thoughts, started having their own opinions. The show takes you right into that world and shows you those people living their lives, believing completely in their own reality, completely unaware that they are inside a machine. Rick has to go into the game to save Morty. He puts on the helmet, he becomes Roy, and once he is inside, he tries to tell the other people in the game the truth. He tells them they are not real. He tells them they are all just pieces of his grandson's mind. He tells them they live inside a machine in an arcade, and that if they will all get in spaceships and fly beyond the edges of the game, the whole thing will reset and Morty will wake up. Most of the people inside the game react the way you would expect. They think he is crazy. They think he is starting a cult. They argue with him. Some try to kill him. Others follow him. A whole religion forms. People who believe Rick are called grandsonists. People who do not believe him call it a doomsday cult. Wars break out between the two sides. Entire generations live and die fighting over whether they are real or not. But here's the part that should stop you cold. One of the characters inside the game, a young woman named Marta, starts asking Rick the right questions. She asks him the questions every thinking person would ask if an old man showed up one day and said, "Your whole world is fake." She asks, if we are not real, do we still matter? If we are just pieces of a boy in an arcade, are our feelings fake too? Is the love I feel for my parents fake? Is the pain I felt when my dog died fake? Is the food I ate yesterday fake? If all of it feels real, how can any of it be fake? And the show, to its credit, does not give her an easy answer, because the show knows. The show knows that for the people inside the Roy game, their world was as real as our world is to us. They lived their whole lives believing in it. They loved people inside it. They made choices. They grew. They hurt. They died. None of that was any less real just because it all took place inside a helmet. Now think about what the show just told you. If a full, believable, emotionally rich universe with over 5 billion people in it can exist inside a helmet at an arcade, then how do you know, right now, that the world you are living in is not also inside a helmet? And if you are watching Rick and Morty, and you are watching Rick and Morty's whole universe, then how do Rick and Morty know their universe is not also inside a helmet? How do they know they are not also inside a game? How do they know Beth is real? How do they know Summer is real? How do they know the Galactic Federation and the Council of Ricks and every alien they have ever met are not just characters in a very good simulation that somebody else is playing? The answer is that they do not know. And the show is telling you right to your face that they do not know. Because here's the thing about the Roy game. The people inside it had no way to check. They had no way to step outside their world and look at it from the outside. They had no way to prove they were in a machine. The only reason we, the audience, know they are in a machine is because we watched Rick and Morty walk up to the arcade cabinet and put coins in it. We saw the machine from the outside. But Rick and Morty have never seen their own universe from the outside. They just assume it is the top level. They just assume they are the real ones. And that assumption, according to this theory, is the biggest blind spot in the whole show. The Roy game is not just a side quest. The Roy game is the show showing you, in plain language, that simulations inside simulations are possible, that you can have a universe filled with conscious people inside a machine, that the people inside that machine will never be able to prove they are fake, and that the only difference between a Roy and a real person is which side of the helmet you happen to be sitting on. And that is before we even get to the other episode that supports this whole idea. Back in season 1, there's an episode called M. Night Shame Aliens, and this is the episode that started the whole conversation. In this episode, Rick and Jerry get kidnapped by aliens and put inside a simulation. The aliens are trying to steal the recipe for something very valuable. They build a fake version of Rick's life. They fill it with fake versions of his family. They run the simulation, hoping Rick will slip and tell the fake family the recipe. Rick figures out very quickly that he is inside a simulation. He finds the glitches. He points them out. He and Morty, the fake simulation Morty, try to escape, but the aliens are smart. When Rick and Morty break out of the first simulation, they find themselves inside a second one. The aliens stacked simulations inside simulations, so that every time Rick thought he escaped, he was actually just moving one level deeper. Eventually, in the episode, Rick fools the aliens. He gives them a fake recipe that blows up their ship, and he supposedly escapes back to the real world. Supposedly. Here is where the theory really digs in. A lot of fans look at that episode and ask a very simple question. How do we know Rick actually escaped? How do we know he made it back to the real world? Because think about it. If the aliens were smart enough to build one layer of simulation inside another, they were smart enough to build one more layer on top of that. They were smart enough to make Rick think he had won. They were smart enough to fake the escape. Give Rick a happy ending. Let him believe he outsmarted them. Send him home with his grandson. Keep him calm and comfortable so that one day, maybe weeks or months later, when he finally lets his guard down, he would accidentally blurt out the real recipe for them to hear. The aliens could still be running the simulation right now, today, in season 7. Every adventure Rick and Morty have had since season 1 could be fake. Every enemy, every friend, every death, every new character, the whole show from season 1, episode 5 onward could be one long, very elaborate trick designed to keep Rick calm until he slips. And the show, being the show, gave us a hint that this might actually be true. In a season 3 episode called The Ricklantis Mix-Up, there is a side story about a different Rick, a sad Rick, who works a miserable job. This Rick is trying to escape his life. He finally gets out. He finally breaks free. He wins his freedom. And just as the scene ends, the show reveals that his escape was fake. He was never free. He was still trapped. His happy ending was a lie, being played inside his own head, while his real body sat somewhere quiet, locked up, being used by the people who caught him. That is the exact same trick the aliens tried to play on our Rick in season 1. The show is not hiding this. The show is showing you how the trick works. It is waving at you. It is saying, hey, remember that simulation thing? Yeah, we want you to think about it. And there is one more detail, one more piece. And this one, honestly, is the creepiest of all. At the end of M. Night Shame Aliens, when Rick and Morty supposedly get home, the episode does not just end with a happy family scene. It ends with Rick, in the middle of the night, sneaking into Morty's bedroom while he is asleep. Rick is drunk. Rick is holding a knife. And Rick stands stands over Morty's bed and asks him, with quiet terror in his voice, "Are you a simulation?" That is not a joke. That is not a throwaway. That is the show showing you that even Rick, the smartest man in the universe, does not know if he made it back out. He is standing over his grandson with a knife because he is not sure if the grandson is real. He is not sure if the bed is real. He is not sure if anything is real. He is terrified, deep in his bones, that the escape was fake and that he is still inside the machine, and that his grandson is just another painted picture on the walls of his own personal prison. He puts the knife down. He leaves the room. He does not get an answer, because you can never get an answer. The whole point of a simulation is that you cannot test your way out of it. Any test you run is part of the simulation. Any answer you get is the answer the simulation wants to give you. There is no escape from a world that has been built around you, because anything you use to escape was built into the world from the start. That is why the Roy game is so scary. Not because it is weird, or because the people inside it suffer, or because Morty gets trapped in it and almost dies. It is scary because it proves the rule. It proves that you can have an entire species of people who love each other and fight for each other and believe in their own reality, and every single one of them is wrong. Their reality is a trick. Their lives are a machine. Their love is lines of code, and they will never know. If the Roy game can do that to 5 billion imaginary people, then somewhere out there is a machine big enough to do it to Rick, and to Morty, and to Beth, and Summer, and Jerry. And if you follow the chain all the way up, maybe to every single one of us, too. Because nothing in the show says that the universe Rick lives in is the last real one. Nothing in the show says the buck stops here. The show keeps hinting, over and over, that there might always be another helmet, another cabinet, another kid at an arcade feeding coins into a machine called the Smith family. A life well lived. And if that is true, if Rick and Morty's whole universe is just someone else's game, then the laughs, the adventures, the deaths, the love, the tears, all of it is for somebody else's entertainment. And when the credits roll on the last episode of Rick and Morty, somewhere out there, a hand will reach up, take the helmet off, and walk away from the arcade. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But even inside a simulation, some moments feel more important than others. Some moments, even if they are fake, feel real. And that brings us to a different, darker question. What if we could prove it? What if there was an episode of the show with an exact line of dialogue that told us, beyond any doubt, that Rick has known this whole time that he is trapped, that he never escaped the Season 1 simulation, that every single thing he has done since then has been inside the machine, and that the one person who could prove it to you is a dumb, happy, oblivious man sitting at a desk pitching ad slogans for apples? Because there is one character in the show who might be living proof that none of it is real. Section 6. Rick and Jerry never escaped the simulation. We ended on a question. What if we could prove it? What if there was a single character sitting in the background of the show, smiling in almost every family scene, completely unaware of what he is? A man who might be the final, quiet piece of evidence that Rick Sanchez, the smartest man in the universe, has been trapped inside a fake world for almost the entire run of the show. That man is Jerry. Yes, Jerry, the husband, the father, the guy who gets laughed at, the guy who fumbles through every adventure, the guy everyone dismisses. The theory says that Jerry is not just a fool. Jerry is the proof. And once you see what his role in this theory is, the whole show starts to look very, very different. Go back to the episode. M. Night Shyamalan's Season 1, Episode 4. Rick and Jerry get kidnapped. The aliens put them inside a simulation. They do not know they are in it. Rick figures it out first. Jerry never does. Here is the detail most people miss. When the aliens built the simulation, they did not build it equally for both men. Rick, being a genius, got a high-powered, very detailed, very complex simulation. The aliens poured all their effort into fooling him. They used their best hardware on his side of the game. His world looked real because the aliens made it look real. But Jerry is an idiot. Everyone in the show says so. The Galactic Federation scans Jerry's brain at one point in Season 3 and gives him a cognitive score so low that the machine calls him a useless waste. The aliens who built the simulation knew this. They looked at Jerry and said, "We do not need to try that hard with him." So they put Jerry's simulation on a very low-powered, cheap, broken version of their machine. A budget version. A discount simulation. This is not a guess. The show tells you this out loud. The aliens say it themselves. They describe Jerry's simulation as running on low capacity. They did not even bother building a full world for him. They built a tiny, buggy, glitching little corner, and they dumped him into it. And the whole episode shows you, over and over, that Jerry never once notices the glitches. Jerry's simulation is full of broken things. People say the same word over and over. Jerry wins an award that did not exist 20 seconds earlier. His boss gets stuck in a loop, snapping his fingers and saying yes. Jerry gets promoted, fired, rehired, and promoted again, all in under a minute. The whole world around him is falling apart in obvious, loud, impossible ways. And Jerry just walks through all of it, smiling, completely satisfied, having what he later calls the best day of his life. That is the key. Pay attention to that line. Jerry says on screen in the episode that the day inside the simulation was the best day of his life. The best day of his life was fake. His best day ever was inside a machine. His happiest memory is a lie, created by aliens who did not even respect him enough to give him a proper version of the lie. Now here's where the theory gets scary. The fans who first noticed this ask a simple question. If Jerry was too dumb to notice he was in a fake world, and if Jerry could walk all the way through a broken simulation without once spotting the glitches, then what makes anyone think Rick actually noticed either? Rick thinks he noticed. Rick is sure he noticed. Rick acts like he spotted every single glitch and outsmarted the aliens and escaped back to the real world. Rick is proud of himself at the end of that episode. Rick believes he won, but the aliens are smart. That is the whole point. They built two simulations on purpose. A low-budget one for Jerry, a very expensive, very careful, very convincing one for Rick. And the theory says the expensive simulation did not just fool Rick inside the episode. The expensive simulation fooled Rick forever. Because here's the twist the show hides in plain sight. Rick finds glitches. Of course he does. The aliens want him to find glitches. If Rick never found anything, he would get suspicious. The aliens need to let him catch a few things, so he will believe he is beating the system. They give him easy wins. They let him spot a broken person here, a looping bit of dialogue there. And every time Rick spots a glitch, he feels smarter. He feels in control. He feels like he is escaping. He is not escaping. He is being played. This is a trick con artists have used for 1,000 years. Let the mark win a few times. Let them think they are ahead. Keep them confident. Keep them happy. And when they are so sure they have outsmarted you, that is when you take everything they have. The aliens do this to Rick. They let him run through 3 different layers of simulation. They let him feel like he has broken through each one. They act shocked and angry every time he outsmarts them. They perform defeat. They make him feel like a genius. And at the end of the episode, when Rick supposedly escapes and gets home, the show plants a very small, very quiet scene. The kind of scene you almost forget. Rick walks into his garage, punches in a code on a hidden safe, and the safe refuses to open. Rick frowns. He tries again. The safe still refuses. The garage around him shimmers, melts, turns back into a simulation. He was still inside. Now here's the thing. The show, inside that episode, shows Rick escaping from this layer too. Shows Rick tricking the aliens one more time. Shows him giving them a fake recipe that blows up their ship. Shows him returning home to a happy family. Roll credits. But remember what I said. The aliens are smart. They have already proven in the same episode that they can stack simulations inside simulations. They have already proven that they can fake an escape. They have already proven that Rick's happy ending can be manufactured. The scene of Rick escaping, the scene of the aliens dying on their own ship, the scene of Rick getting home to his family, all of that could be the next layer, the real final layer, the one Rick never sees through, the one he cannot see through, because the whole point of that layer is that it feels like freedom. The aliens fake his victory. They fake his return. They fake the entire rest of his life. And somewhere, in a little room on an alien ship, the real Rick is still sitting in a chair with wires on his head, eyes half open, mumbling his recipes while the aliens write them down. And the most important clue in the whole episode is Jerry. Because remember, Jerry never noticed anything. Jerry walked through his fake day and loved every minute of it. Jerry came home and could not tell anyone it was fake because to him, it was not fake. To him, it was just the best day he ever had. Jerry is the living example of what a simulation looks like from the inside when you are not smart enough to spot it. If Jerry could not spot a bad simulation that was literally broken around him, then Rick, who is an addict, who is emotionally wrecked, who is drunk most of the time, who is carrying decades of trauma, might not be able to spot a really good simulation. A simulation built by aliens who specifically designed it to beat Rick Sanchez. And the show confirms this fear with the last shot of the episode. Late at night, after everyone has gone to bed, Rick sneaks into Morty's room. He is holding a knife. He is shaking. He stands over his sleeping grandson and whispers a single question. Are you a simulation? That is not a drunk joke. That is a man who is not sure if he made it out. That is a man who looked at his safe safe refusing to open, looked at his happy ending, looked at his family sitting around the dinner table, and could not tell if any of it was real. He has a knife in his hand because part of him wants to test it. Part of him wants to stab Morty just to see if Morty bleeds. Part of him wants to know if the boy is flesh or pixels or just another character painted in by the aliens to keep him calm. He does not use the knife. He puts it down. He walks out. He goes back to bed. He drinks. But that moment tells you everything. Rick does not believe he escaped. Not fully. Not for sure. And if Rick does not believe it, why should you? Now let me tell you what this theory does to the rest of the show. If Rick never actually escaped the simulation, then every episode after M. Night Shyamalan's is fake. Every adventure, every friend, every death, every emotional moment. The entire run of the show, from season 1, episode 5 onward, is just the aliens spinning a very long, very detailed story around Rick designed to keep him from suspecting anything. Think about how much sense this makes. Why does Rick keep meeting new, strange, wildly creative characters every week? Because a simulation needs variety to stay interesting, or else the mark starts to notice how empty it is. Why does Rick keep winning almost every single time, even when the odds are impossible, even when he should die? Why does he always come back? Because in a simulation designed to keep Rick calm, letting him die would end the whole trip. The aliens cannot let him lose. They have to give him victory after victory, so he stays comfortable, so he stays happy, so one day he finally relaxes enough to spill the recipe they need. Why do all of Rick's big, emotional moments feel suspiciously timed? The loss of his wife, the reveal of Birdperson's backstory, the death of various friends. Every single time Rick is about to become suspicious, something emotional happens that distracts him. That is not bad writing. That is the simulation. The simulation is keeping him off balance on purpose. A grieving Rick is a sloppy Rick. A sloppy Rick is easier to fool. Why does the Galactic Federation keep coming back? Why do new versions of his enemies keep showing up? Because the aliens need a steady supply of threats to keep Rick busy. As long as Rick is fighting somebody, Rick is not looking around and noticing the cracks in the sky. Every single thing that has happened to Rick for 7 seasons could be the simulation, and there is no way from the inside for Rick to prove it is not. And that is why Jerry is the proof. Not because Jerry is smart, the opposite. Jerry is proof because Jerry is so dumb that the show uses him to show what a person looks like when they are inside a fake world and cannot tell. Jerry is the control group. Jerry is the test subject the aliens use to show themselves how well their machine works. And Jerry sat inside the worst version of their machine and smiled the whole way through it. The rest of the family, for all this time, has had Jerry right there at the table with them. They have laughed at him, they have pitied him, but they have never once stopped to ask what he is doing in a family with a genius grandfather and a science-wielding grandson. What if Jerry was left behind in the simulation on purpose? What if the aliens kept Jerry because Jerry was their proof of concept? What if Jerry is, without knowing it, a living reminder that the aliens can make a human being believe anything? Rick looks at Jerry every day and hates him. Can you blame him? Every time Rick looks at Jerry, he is looking at the argument against his own life. He is looking at a man who does not know he is fake. He is looking at a version of what he might be himself. That is why he cannot stand Jerry. Not because Jerry is dumb, but because Jerry is a mirror Rick cannot afford to look into. If you take this theory seriously, then the saddest character in the whole show is not Beth, it is not Morty, it is not even Rick. It is the Rick we do not see, the real one, the one still sitting in that chair on the alien ship, the one with the wires on his head, the one whose body has been still for years, while his mind has been watching an extremely detailed, very expensive, very cruel cartoon about a family he does not actually have. And somewhere inside that same ship, there is a smaller, cheaper chair with a smaller, cheaper set of wires. And sitting in that chair, smiling in his sleep, dreaming about apples, is Jerry. Not the Jerry we know, the real one, the one who has been asleep for just as long, the one who is still, even now, writing ad slogans in his head, the one whose best day ever has not yet ended. Because as far as he knows, in the world inside his mind, it never ended at all. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But even if Rick is still trapped in that chair, even if the whole show is fake, there is still somebody Rick loves. Somebody who has meant more to him than anyone else. Even more than Morty, even more than Beth. Somebody whose story, once it was finally told, broke Rick in a way the show has never let him recover from. And the worst part is not what happened to that person. The worst part is what Rick did to them, twice. And the second time, he might might not have even realized he was doing it. Section 7. Birdperson was Rick's real love, and Rick ruined him twice. Rick Sanchez has loved exactly one person in his life the way most people mean when they say the word love. Not his wife, not his daughter, not his grandson. A man with feathers, a beak, and a soft voice who barely says anything across the entire show, and who was, for decades, Rick's best friend in the universe. His name is Birdperson, and the show, in Season 5, revealed something that changed how every single Birdperson scene from the earlier seasons reads. In an episode called Rickternal Friendshine of the Spotless Mort, Rick enters Birdperson's mind to pull him out of a coma. While he is in there, walking through Birdperson's memories, he stumbles onto a memory from long ago. A memory from a famous battle Rick has mentioned many times before, something called the Battle of Blood Ridge. For seasons, fans thought the Battle of Blood Ridge was Rick's version of a horrible war memory, the thing that broke him, the thing that gave him his cynicism, something violent, something full of loss. It was none of those things. The memory shows a younger Rick, just after the battle, sitting with a younger Birdperson. The fight is over, the dust is settling, and younger Rick turns to his best friend and tells him, out loud, for the first time, that he loves him. Not in a friendship way, in a real way, in a romantic way. Birdperson does not say it back. Rick, who has just poured out his entire heart, gets rejected by the one being in the universe whose opinion actually matters to him. And the show makes it clear, in this moment, that this is the real event that shaped everything about who Rick became. Not the loss of Diane, not the war against the Galactic Federation. This, a quiet moment on a battlefield. A man telling a Birdman that he loved him. And the Birdman, not cruelly, not angrily, just quietly, not being able to give him the same thing back. Now go back and rewatch Birdperson's wedding. The episode is called The Wedding Squanchers, at the end of Season 2. Birdperson is getting married to a woman named Tammy. Rick spends the entire episode miserable. He is rude to everyone, he snaps at his family, he drinks more than usual, he makes a speech that is supposed to be happy but sounds like it is being dragged out of him. Everyone else at the wedding is having fun. Rick is falling apart. For years, fans thought Rick was just being a grumpy grandpa. Now we know what he actually was. He was watching the love of his life marry somebody else. He was sitting at a table, drinking through the pain, watching his best friend, who had already rejected him once, commit to a woman Rick did not trust. His speech was not a grumpy old man's toast. It was the closest thing to a goodbye he could manage without saying the real words out loud. And then, at that same wedding, Tammy pulls out a gun. Tammy, the woman Birdperson chose over Rick, turns out to be a spy for the Galactic Federation. She shoots Birdperson, shoots him over and over, kills him right there in front of everyone. Rick watches it happen. Imagine that for a second. Imagine loving someone for decades. Imagine finally telling them. Imagine being told no. Imagine watching them choose someone else. Imagine watching that someone else murder them at their own wedding, inches from you, while you are holding a drink. That is Rick's life. But the show does not stop there. Because in the next season, we find out that Birdperson did not stay dead. The Galactic Federation picked up his body, rebuilt him, turned him into a cyborg, brainwashed him, gave him a new name, Phoenixperson, and sent him out into the universe as a weapon. Rick finds him, fights him, survives the fight only because his daughters save him. And then Rick takes what is left of Phoenixperson's body, drags it home, and keeps it in his garage. Pause there. Think about what that means. Rick kept his dead friend's broken body in his garage. Parts, pieces, a head, a torso, the thing that used to be the person he loved most in the universe, scattered across a workbench, covered in a sheet, sitting next to the lawnmower, for an unknown amount of time. The show does not tell you exactly how long. It could have been weeks, it could have been months, it could have been years. Rick lived his life, took Morty on adventures, laughed, drank, slept, ate breakfast, all while the broken remains of his best friend sat in the same house as him, waiting. A normal person would bury a friend. A normal person would grieve. Rick could not. He could not let go. He could not put the body in the ground, because putting the body in the ground would mean admitting Birdperson was gone. And admitting Birdperson was gone was the one thing Rick was not capable of doing. And finally, in Season 5, he decides he cannot take it anymore. He rebuilds the body. He enters Birdperson's mind using a machine and tries to pull him back out of the coma that Birdperson has put himself into. Because here is the detail that hits the hardest. Birdperson was in that coma on purpose. Birdperson wanted to die inside his own head. Birdperson was trying to quietly end his own existence from the inside, because life after Tammy, life as Phoenixperson, life as a weapon, was not a life he wanted. Rick pulled him out anyway. Rick reached into his friend's dying mind, past his friend's wishes, and yanked him back to the world. Not because Birdperson Birdperson wanted to come back because Rick wanted him back. That is love, but it is also the worst kind of love. The kind where you do not care what the other person actually wants. The kind where you will reach across the grave and drag them home so you do not have to be alone. And Rick only succeeds at saving him by telling him that Birdperson has a daughter out there somewhere. That is the only thing that gives Birdperson a reason to wake up. Not Rick, not their friendship, not decades of shared history. A daughter Birdperson has never met. Birdperson opens his eyes, looks at Rick, and leaves to go find his child. He does not stay. He does not hug Rick. He does not thank him. He just goes. Which means Rick, at the end of all of it, is still alone. Now think about what this does to Morty, because the theory that follows from all this is simple and ugly. Morty is not Rick's grandson. Morty is Rick's replacement. Rick wanted Birdperson. Rick could not have him. Birdperson rejected him. Birdperson married someone else. Birdperson died. Birdperson came back as a weapon. Birdperson left again to raise his own kid. Every version of having Birdperson in his life, Rick has tried, and every version has failed. So Rick found a substitute. A small, weak, confused 14-year-old boy who cannot say no. A boy who, unlike Birdperson, will always come on adventures, will always be in the house, will always be there when Rick walks downstairs, will never reject him, will never leave him, will never marry a spy, will never die on a battlefield. Morty is not a friend. Morty is not a partner. Morty is a safer, smaller, less dangerous version of the relationship Rick actually wanted and could not have. Morty is what Rick settled for. Morty is the consolation prize. Watch the show again through this lens. Every time Rick calls Morty his little buddy, every time Rick puts his arm around him, every time Rick says something unexpectedly tender, then pulls back fast like he embarrassed himself, all of that looks different now. It looks like a man reaching for someone he lost, using his grandson to fill a wound he never closed. And Morty does not know. Morty thinks his grandfather loves him, and Rick does in his way, but Rick's version of love is shaped by a battlefield he cannot stop remembering, by a Birdman who could not love him back, by a wedding he had to watch, by a garage full of parts he could not bring himself to bury. The saddest part of the whole thing is that Birdperson, at the very end, tells Rick the truth Rick has spent his life running from. In the middle of the rescue, Birdperson looks at Rick and tells him something simple and final. He tells him that Rick was always a bad friend. Not a bad enemy, not a bad genius, a bad friend. The one job Rick most wanted to be good at, the one role he most wanted to succeed in. Birdperson, with his dying strength, told him he had failed at it. And Rick did not argue, because Rick knew he was right. So Rick goes home, goes to the garage, pours another drink, sits next to a 14-year-old boy who will never be the person he actually wanted. And the show keeps going. Episode after episode. Adventure after adventure. A man pretending to enjoy his life, holding on to a grandson who does not know he is a replacement, while the one person Rick ever truly loved is somewhere across the galaxy, raising a daughter, never coming back. That is the love story at the center of Rick and Morty. It is not funny. It is not hopeful. It is a man who told the truth once, got rejected once, and never recovered. And the show has been about him finding smaller and smaller people to love in smaller and smaller ways for the rest of his life. Because the big love, the real one, closed its door on him a long time ago. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And if Rick is willing to use his grandson as a stand-in for a man he could not have, if Rick is willing to keep a broken friend in his garage for years, if Rick is willing to drag a dying bird out of his own peaceful death just so he does not have to grieve, then there is no line Rick will not cross to avoid being alone. There is no rule he will not break. There is no reality he will not destroy. And in fact, the show has already shown you one entire universe that Rick threw into the trash, walked away from, and never once looked back at. A universe full of people who loved him. A universe he turned into a wasteland in an afternoon. And a universe that, even now, is still out there somewhere, starving, bleeding, and waiting. Section 8. The Croninberg dimension is where the show actually takes place in horror. Section 7 ended on a universe Rick threw into the trash. That universe has a name. It is called the Prime Dimension. It is the original world where Rick and Morty lived when the show started, and it is still out there, right now, bleeding, starving, and forgotten. The show has never let you forget it, even though it acts like it has. The episode is Rick Potion 9, Season 1, Episode 6. A short little episode that most people remember as funny. It is not funny. It is the darkest thing that has ever happened on the show, and the show has quietly spent the last 6 seasons pretending it is fine. Here is what happened. Morty had a crush on a girl girl named Jessica. He asked Rick for a love potion. Rick made one. Morty used it on Jessica at a school dance. The potion worked too well. It hopped from Jessica onto every person who touched her. Then it went airborne. Within hours, every single person on Earth was infected. Every human, every animal, everyone was obsessed with Morty. They wanted to mate with him, then kill him. Rick tried to fix it. He made a second potion. That one turned everyone into praying mantis people. He made a third potion. That one turned everyone into slimy, twisted, deformed monsters the show called Croninbergs. Whole planet, every living thing, all of them, reduced to horrors. Only 3 humans survived normal: Beth, Jerry, Summer. Rick and Morty, standing on a rooftop, watched the world they had just destroyed. Rick shrugged. Morty cried. And Rick explained what he was going to do. He was going to open a portal, find a different reality. One where there was another Rick and another Morty, and where they had just died in an accident. And Rick and Morty would step into that reality, bury their other selves in the backyard, and slip into those lives like nothing had happened. That is what they did. The episode ends with Morty sitting on a new couch in a new house with a new family that looks exactly like the old one, staring blankly at nothing while soft music plays and the credits roll. Everyone remembers that ending, but almost nobody remembers what happened to the family he left behind. The 3 people who survived: Beth Prime, Jerry Prime, Summer Prime, the originals, the real versions of the family we have been following this whole time. They were left alone on a planet of monsters. No science, no portal gun, no rescue coming. Just the 3 of them in a broken world. And the show went back to them more than once, so you do not have to guess what their lives became. You get to see it. They lived in a van, a single van, welded together with spikes and metal plates and whatever they could scavenge. They ate Croninbergs. They hunted their own former neighbors for meat, roasted them over fires. Summer, the little girl from the show, grew up in this wasteland. She stood inside a cardboard box pretending she was on television, because in the real world, there was no television anymore. There was no school. There were no friends. There was only her parents and the monsters and the van. Beth, who used to be a horse doctor, became something else entirely. Tougher, harder, colder. She carried weapons now. She killed monsters on sight. She had to. Jerry, weirdly, became a hero in this world. The same Jerry everyone laughed at in the other dimension. In the Croninberg world, he was the provider. He protected his family. He fought. He bled. He kept them alive. It was the most he ever amounted to in his life. And it happened because his real father-in-law, Rick, had given up on the whole planet. And then it got worse. In the season 3 premiere, we learn what finally happened to Summer Prime. A team of Ricks from another dimension showed up, hunting our Rick. They found the family. Summer was with them. During the fight, the Ricks froze her solid. Froze her into a block of ice. She did not die right away. She was alive inside the ice for at least a short time. Then she died, inside a frozen prison. Because she had been born in the wrong reality. Because her grandfather had moved somewhere nicer. Beth Prime died not long after. She got sick. A cut, an infection, something Croninberg related that a horse doctor with no hospital and no medicine could not treat. She died quietly, out there, in the van, with Jerry sitting next to her, holding her hand. Then, in season 6, the last survivor was killed too. Jerry Prime, alone, sitting in his own home, murdered by a version of Rick we have not even gotten into yet. Shot in the head. No warning, no reason, no goodbye. Every single person Morty grew up with in that original reality is now dead. His mother, in a pool of Croninberg infection. His father, shot in his kitchen. His sister, frozen into a statue. Everyone he loved in his original life, every memory he has of his actual mother kissing him goodnight, his actual father making him a sandwich, his actual sister teasing him at breakfast, those people are not alive anymore. And Morty knows. That is the part that gets me. Morty knows. He has known the whole time. He told Summer in season 2 that their real family was dead or trapped in that world. And after that conversation, the show just kept going. They kept having adventures. Morty kept going to school. Morty kept sitting at the dinner table with a woman who looks exactly like his mother, a father who looks exactly like his father, a sister who looks exactly like his sister. None of them are his. All 3 of the real ones are gone, and he has to pretend otherwise every single day. Think about what that does to a 14-year-old boy. Now run that through the rest of the show. Every smile Morty has given across 7 seasons is happening on top of this. Every time Morty hugs his mother, he is hugging a replacement. Every time Morty laughs with Summer, he is laughing with a stranger who has his sister's face. Every time Morty argues with Jerry, he is arguing with a man whose original version was murdered, alone and afraid. Every joke, every moment, every crush on Jessica, all of it is being played out by a boy whose actual family was swallowed by a a world of monsters while he walked away. And Morty buried himself in that backyard. Literally, he dug a hole and lowered his own corpse into it and covered it with dirt. A 14-year-old boy put his own body in the ground and then walked inside the house and sat on a couch. This is why some fans believe Morty, underneath all the jokes and the stuttering and the adventures, is in a constant state of quiet shock. A kid who saw what he saw cannot come back from it. A kid who buried himself cannot be okay. He is going through the motions, smiling when he needs to, crying when it is safe to, pretending the family around him is the family he knows, but he knows it is not. And every adventure Rick drags him on after that first one is a distraction from a grief that the show never once lets him actually talk about. Season 3 confirmed it with one of the bleakest scenes the show has ever made. An episode called Morty's Mind Blowers. Rick has a whole wall of little glass tubes, hundreds of them. Each tube contains a memory. Memories so bad that Morty had asked Rick to take them away. Memories that broke him. Memories he could not live with. The wall is so full it is almost out of space. A 14-year-old boy with hundreds of memories he could not live through. Memories sitting on a shelf in a garage next to a lawnmower. One of those memories has to be the Croninberg world. It has to. You cannot bury your own body and just walk away from it. Somewhere on that wall, in a little glass tube, is Morty lowering himself into a hole in the yard. And every time Morty goes in there to get a hammer or a screwdriver, he walks past a shelf that contains every piece of his own soul that he could not hold in his head anymore. That is what the Croninberg dimension really is. It is not a funny side story. It is not a weird episode people half remember. It is the foundation of the entire show. Every episode after that one is a kid running from the worst day of his life on adventures that his grandfather has designed, in a house with a family he is not allowed to love fully, carrying a memory he has had to pay a man to take out of his own head just to keep walking around. And Rick walks past that shelf of memories every day. Rick knows what is in those tubes. Rick put them there. Rick made the machine that takes them out, and Rick has never once offered to put any of them back, because the second he did, Morty would remember what Rick helped him do, and the whole careful, quiet, borrowed life they have built together would collapse. So they keep going. A grandfather who has thrown away one universe and kept the pieces in a jar. A grandson who has buried himself. And a new family who smiles at them across the dinner table, never once realizing they are the substitutes, never once realizing that the real Smiths are dead. A life lived on top of a grave. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But at least the grave is honest. At least the people who are dead in that universe are actually dead. At least the Smiths in the Croninberg world were real when they lived. There is one other member of this family, one person who sits at the table, who shows up in photos, who has been part of their lives since season 2. A friendly, harmless, cheerful man. And he might not be a person at all. He might be something far older, far stranger, and far more frightening than anyone in the show has ever realized. And the creator of the show himself has hinted at what he really is. Section 9. Mr. Poopy Butthole is a memory parasite, just a nicer one. The man at the dinner table. The friendly one. The one with the yellow sweater vest and the gentle voice. The one who shows up in photos. The one who talks straight to the camera at the end of episodes. The one you have been smiling at for years. That man might not be a man at all. He might not even be a person. He might be one of the most dangerous creatures the Rick and Morty universe has ever introduced, just wearing a softer face. His name is Mr. Poopy Butthole, and there is a very good chance he has been lying to you and to the Smith family since the moment he first appeared on screen. To understand why, you have to go back to season 2, episode 4. The episode is called Total Recall. It is one of the scariest episodes the show has ever made, even though it is also one of the funniest. The plot is simple and sick. The Smith family house has been invaded by creatures called memory parasites. These creatures look like normal people at first. They walk around, they talk, they are friendly, they laugh at the family's jokes, but they have no bodies. Not really. What they have is the ability to plant themselves inside people's memories. They make you think they have always been there. A long-lost uncle, a childhood friend, a teammate from high school, a cousin, a grandfather. Whoever they are, the second you see them, your brain fills in a lifetime of fake memories to match. You remember camping trips with them. You remember birthday parties. You remember the time they saved your life. None of it happened. They only arrived in your house a few minutes ago. But your brain, now full of false memories, cannot tell the difference. Worse, they grow. Every time one of these creatures makes you believe in a happy memory, a new parasite appears out of thin air. And that new parasite brings new memories of its own, which creates more parasites, which creates more memories. dies, which creates more parasites. Before long, the Smith house is packed wall to wall with dozens of smiling strangers, all of them claiming to have known the family for years, all of them feeding on belief like vampires feeding on blood. Rick figures out how to tell real people from parasites. The trick is simple and horrible. The parasites can only create happy, pleasant memories. They cannot make you remember something bad. So Rick tells the family to shoot anyone they do not have a bad memory of. If you cannot remember a time this person annoyed you, betrayed you, hurt your feelings, or embarrassed you, they are a fake parasite. Kill them. The family starts shooting. One by one, every single one of these characters drops to the floor and turns into a gray, squirming monster. The illusion of happiness cannot survive. These things were never real. By the end of the episode, every parasite is dead. The family stands there, exhausted, holding guns, surrounded by bodies. They think the nightmare is over. Then one last person walks in, a friendly little man in a yellow sweater vest. He says hi. He smiles. Beth is the first to react. She shoots him in the stomach. He falls. And then they realize what they have done. Because Beth does have a bad memory of this man. She borrowed money from him once and never paid him back. She felt guilty about it for years. He is not a parasite. He is real. He is their friend, Mr. Poopy Butthole. He has always been their friend, and they just shot him in the gut because they assumed he was another monster. He survives, barely. He is taken to the hospital, and from that point on, across the rest of the show, Mr. Poopy Butthole is treated as a beloved, harmless, confirmed, real character. A family friend, a good guy, the exception to the rule. Except he is not, because the more you think about it, the more his story does not hold up. And the darkest thing about him is not a fan guess. It is something the creator of the show himself, Dan Harmon, has gone on the record and suggested out loud. Dan Harmon has said, more than once, that his personal belief is that Mr. Poopy Butthole is still a parasite, just a different kind, a more advanced one, a nicer one. According to Harmon's own idea, Mr. Poopy Butthole belongs to a second, older strain of the same creatures, a strain that does not plant fake memories into people's heads. Instead, they find existing gaps in people's memory, holes, empty spots, places in your past that your brain does not have full records of, and they slide themselves into those holes perfectly, like a key sliding into a lock. A normal parasite creates a false memory from nothing. A Poopy Butthole type parasite uses a real empty memory slot and fills it with itself. The difference is massive, because if the slot was already real, then the rule Rick used to catch the parasites does not work on this kind. A Poopy Butthole parasite can have bad memories with you. They can have good memories with you. They can have a full, believable, tested history with you, because they did not invent the memories. They moved into real ones. Which means the test that saved the family from the parasites, the only test they had, the only tool in the whole episode, does not work on Mr. Poopy Butthole. He slipped past the test. He passed it by being, in some way, real to them. Real enough that Beth remembered owing him money. Real enough that none of them could shoot him without guilt. If Harmon is right, Mr. Poopy Butthole is smarter than the other parasites. More patient, more careful. He does not swarm. He does not multiply. He slides into one family at a time and stays for decades. A quiet, gentle house guest. A friend. A face at the dinner table. Never noticed, never questioned. Eating. Because remember, that is what these creatures do. They feed. The memory parasites in Total Recall were not just there for fun. They were a species, surviving by living inside the minds of other creatures. That is their food. That is how they exist. And if Mr. Poopy Butthole belongs to the same family, even a more evolved version, he is still doing the same thing. Somewhere, in some way, he is feeding on the Smiths. We do not know what his version of feeding looks like. The show has not shown it. But whatever it is, it has been happening to this family for years. Every dinner he eats with them, every Christmas he spends with them, every time he breaks the fourth wall and talks to the audience. All of it, if Harmon's theory is right, is a parasite, very slowly, very gently, draining something it needs out of the people it has attached itself to. And that brings us to the part of the theory that is genuinely unsettling. Mr. Poopy Butthole breaks the fourth wall. He talks to us. He looks directly at the camera and addresses the audience, on screen in the middle of the show. He has done this more than any other character except Rick. Why? There is a version of this theory that says Mr. Poopy Butthole's strain of parasite is not limited to the people inside the show. There is a version that says his kind can cross into the audience. That the show itself, the thing we are all watching, is a bridge. That every time Mr. Poopy Butthole looks at the camera and says hello, and every time he invites us to stay tuned for next season, and every time he grins and says our names into the lens, he is doing a little bit of what he does to the the Smiths. He is slipping into a gap in your memory, inserting himself, making you feel like he is your buddy, like you have known him for a while, like he is a friendly, safe, familiar face in a show you love. But you did not know him 10 seasons ago. You never met him. You have no real memories of him. He has only been in your life because a television showed him to you. And yet, if you are a fan of the show, you probably feel warm when you see him, affectionate, like he is an old friend. That feeling, if the theory is right, is not your feeling. That feeling is the parasite doing its job. Now, obviously the show is a cartoon. Obviously this is not real in the way we mean in the actual world. But inside the logic of the show, this is exactly what Mr. Poopy Butthole does. He creates warmth. He creates familiarity. He creates the feeling of a long friendship that cannot really be explained. And the creator of the show has already hinted that this warmth inside the world of the show is a trick. A quiet, clever, well-dressed trick. Sitting at the dinner table in a yellow sweater vest, eating the Smith family's food, smiling at their jokes, never once accidentally revealing what he really is. The saddest part of this theory is not even what Mr. Poopy Butthole is doing. The saddest part is what the Smiths think he is doing. To them, he is a friend. To them, he is safe. To them, he is the one outside face that has stuck with them through all the chaos. In a family where the grandfather is drunk and lost, where the mother is a possible clone, where the father does not know who anyone really is, where the son buried his own body in the yard, Mr. Poopy Butthole is the one warm, simple, nice presence in their lives. And if Harmon is right, he is not nice at all. He is the oldest trick in the universe, wearing a sweater, pretending to love them, and quietly feeding on something nobody else can see, which is a horror all by itself. The idea that a family can be so broken, so stretched thin, so full of lies and replacements and trauma, that the creature feeding on them is not the worst thing at the table. The creature feeding on them might actually be one of the kinder guests in the house, because at least he is patient, at least he is quiet, at least he does not try to kill them, at least he smiles. In a house full of bigger monsters, a parasite might be the safest friend the Smiths have left. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Mr. Poopy Butthole is just a house guest. A quiet, strange, maybe not quite human one. He did not build the world the Smiths live inside of. Somebody else did. Somebody much bigger. Somebody who, a long time ago, made a choice so selfish and so cowardly that it shaped every single reality in the entire show. And that somebody is Rick. The theory that explains why he made that choice, and what he was really hiding, and why every version of himself across every universe has been locked inside a cage Rick himself drew the bars on, is the one that finishes this story. Section 10. The central finite curve is Rick's prison, and he built it himself. Section 9 ended on a choice. One man, a long time ago, made a decision that shaped every single universe in the show. That man is Rick, and the choice he made is not a fan theory. It is not a guess. The show, in the season 5 finale, put it on screen in plain language, and then never really let anyone recover from it. The episode is called Rick Mirai Jack, season 5, episode 10. And inside that episode, evil Morty, the boy in the eye patch, walks into a room full of Ricks and tells them something that changes the entire show. He tells them the truth about the universe. He tells them that everything, every adventure, every alien planet, every dimension Rick has ever taken Morty to, every corner of space they have ever explored is fake. Not fake in the simulation way. Fake in a different way. Fake because it has all been limited, boxed in, trimmed down, kept small. Rick, a long time ago, built a wall. Not a wall you can see, a wall around reality itself. A wall that cuts the whole multiverse, every possible universe, into two groups. On one side of the wall, every universe where Rick Sanchez is the smartest creature alive. On the other side, every universe where he is not. Rick locked himself, and every other Rick, and every Morty, and every Beth, and every Summer, and every Jerry onto the first side of that wall, the smart Rick side. And then he sealed the door, threw away the key, and made sure that no Rick anywhere in the multiverse could ever travel to a universe where he was not the king. Evil Morty is the one who explains it. He gives a speech. The speech is short and sharp. He says that Rick's built a wall around infinity itself, that they separated every universe from every other universe where Rick is the smartest thing alive, that every version of them, every Morty, every Summer, every Beth, has spent every version of their lives inside one big crib. A crib built around one huge, selfish, scared baby. And the baby is Rick. That crib has a name, the central finite curve. Now stop. Think about what that actually means. Because the word wall does not cover it. Imagine there are endless numbers of universes universes. Endless. More than you can count. In some of those universes, Rick is a genius. In others, he is a normal guy who runs a shop. In others, he is a failure, a drunk, a loser, a criminal. In others, he is a dog. In others, he does not exist at all. In others, somebody else is the smartest. Morty is the smartest. Jerry is the smartest. Summer is the smartest. Diane, Rick's dead wife, is the smartest. All of those universes are out there. All of them are real. And Rick locked himself away from every single one of them. He chose only the universes where he was the best. Only the universes where nobody could outthink him. Only the universes where he was guaranteed to be at the top. And he walled off the rest. The entire rest of infinity. Every version of his life where he was not in charge. He threw them all away. Why? Why would anyone do this? Because Rick is afraid. The most famous line Evil Morty says in that scene gets the answer right. Rick is a scared little baby sitting in a giant crib he built for himself. Sitting there, staring at the bars, pretending he chose this. Pretending it is freedom. Pretending that being the smartest in every direction he can see means he is actually the smartest. When in reality, he cut himself off from anywhere he might lose. He made the test smaller so he could always pass it. Every adventure you have ever watched on this show, every planet Rick and Morty have traveled to, every alien they have met, every villain they have defeated, every friend they have made, every loss they have suffered, all of it has taken place inside the crib, inside the rigged game, inside the small, curated, carefully selected slice of reality where Rick was always going to come out on top. The show Rick and Morty has been happening inside a cage the whole time, and Rick is the one who built the cage. Now, here's the part that hurts. Because Rick did not build the cage to protect himself from his enemies. He did not build it to keep Morty safe. He did not build it to honor his dead wife. He built it because he could not stand the idea that somewhere out there, a Rick existed who was better than him. This is the same man who told his grandson for years that nothing matters, that the universe is big and cold and meaningless, that he, Rick, is just a tiny speck in a huge, empty void, that nothing is important and nobody is special. He was lying every single time. Because a man who truly believed nothing mattered would not spend decades building a wall around infinity to make sure he was always the top dog. A man who truly believed nothing mattered would not care if somebody out there was smarter than him. He would shrug. He would move on. He would go get a drink. Rick built the wall. Which means Rick cares. Rick cares more than anyone. Rick cares so much that he could not stand the existence of a smarter Rick somewhere, anywhere, in all of reality. He had to delete them. He had to cut himself off from them. He had to keep them out. The man who preaches the meaninglessness of life built a prison around the whole multiverse to protect his ego. And everybody else is inside the prison with him. Every Morty, every Beth, every Summer, every Jerry, every version of every member of that family across every universe on the smart Rick side of the wall is locked in, stuck in, forced to live inside a slice of reality that was designed around one man's need to feel superior. They were born inside the cage. They grew up inside the cage. They never had a chance to see what was outside because Rick made sure the outside could not reach them. This is the part that breaks Morty when he finally finds out. Because Morty, our Morty, is in there too. And so is every version of Morty he has ever met. Every Morty on the Citadel. Every Morty tied up as a cloaking device. Every Morty who ever sobbed about his grandfather. All of them are inside a structure one Rick built because he could not handle the idea of being second place. Evil Morty figured it out. That is why he wears the eye patch. That is why he took over the Citadel. That is why he wiped out a whole council of Ricks in one afternoon. He was not doing it because he is evil. He was doing it because he wanted out of the cage. He realized before any other Morty did that he was trapped, that his entire life, from birth to now, had been taking place inside a walled-off slice of reality that one version of his grandfather had constructed for selfish reasons. He did not want power. He did not want revenge. He wanted the door to be open, and he got it. In the season 5 finale, Evil Morty punched a hole in the wall of the central finite curve, tore a gap in it, stepped through it, walked out of Rick's prison and into the rest of reality. He walked into universes where Rick is not the smartest, where Rick is not the king, where Rick does not even matter. And the last thing Rick could do was stand there and watch him go, because there was nothing he could do to stop him. That was the ending of season 5. A Morty walking out of a cage, a Rick standing inside it, helpless, watching. The smartest man in the universe reduced to a child at the bars of a crib he built himself, unable to do anything but grip the bars while one small boy walked into the real world. Think about what this does to every earlier scene in the show. Think about what this does to every speech Rick ever gave gave about freedom, every speech about not caring, every speech about living in the moment, every speech about how the universe is big and cold. All of it was a lie told by a man standing inside a prison he personally designed. And here is where it gets worse, because Rick built the wall with help. There were other Ricks, long ago, a group of them. They worked with our Rick to build the central finite curve together. They were called the Council of Ricks. And for years, they lived on a giant space station they called the Citadel, a whole city of Ricks, a whole city of Mortys, living out their lives inside the walled-off crib, running their own economy, running their own politics, running their own lives. And somewhere along the way, our Rick got tired of them, broke away from them, stopped going to the Citadel, stopped talking to the other Ricks. Eventually, in Season 3, he wiped out the Council of Ricks entirely, killed most of the council members, the ones who helped him build the wall, the ones who were his equals, the only people in the multiverse who were even close to being his friends and his peers. He killed them, and then he went home to his grandson, and he acted like nothing happened. This is the man we have been watching every week, a man who built a prison around infinity, who trapped every version of his family inside it, who murdered the only other people in the universe who could have related to him, who preaches meaninglessness while quietly doing the most self-important thing anyone has ever done, and who, even at the end of all this, still has not learned anything, still drinks, still drags Morty on adventures, still sits at the dinner table like he is a normal grandpa. Every time Rick says he does not care, he is lying. Every time Rick says nothing matters, he is lying. Every time Rick rolls his eyes at an emotional moment, he is lying. Because the truth of the central finite curve is that Rick cares more than anyone about himself, about his place, about being the best. He cares so much that he was willing to spit in the face of infinity itself to protect his feelings. The saddest part of the whole thing is the deepest reason for the wall. The reason Rick never admits out loud. The reason evil Morty only hints at. Rick built the wall because he lost Diane. That is it. That is the whole thing. Strip it all down, peel away every excuse, every philosophy, every speech. Rick's wife died. Rick's little daughter died. Rick could not save them. And from that day on, Rick decided that he was going to be the smartest thing in every reality he would ever live inside. Because if he was the smartest, nothing like that could ever happen again. Nothing could ever surprise him. Nothing could ever sneak up on him. Nothing could ever take anything from him again. He did not build the wall to be a god. He built the wall to stop hurting. And the way he stopped hurting was by turning himself into the biggest, smartest, most powerful thing in every room he would ever walk into, so he would never again feel the way he felt on the day Diane died. The central finite curve is a scared man's answer to grief, and every single person trapped inside it, every Morty, every Beth, every Summer, every Jerry, every alien, every planet, every reality is collateral damage from one man's broken heart. A prison made of pain, a universe tailored for one ego, a grandfather holding on to control so tightly that the only way his grandson could escape was to punch a hole in reality itself. And that is where the show leaves us. A cage, a grandfather, a grandson who walked out, and a version of Rick that even now cannot admit what he is really afraid of. Because if he admitted it out loud, the whole thing would come down, and he would finally have to face the world as the small, grieving, scared person he has always really been underneath. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.